Hey, Raja, let me give you some advice. Don't ever play or even mention the game Genshin Impact, or everyone will think that you're a pedophile. That's exactly what I said. So I'm in a bunch of Discords, the biggest Discords on Discord. And what up, Brayhan? Did you watch the end of that documentary? It's okay. Okay. Yeah. Dude, because I know my friend Riser came in and I've been talking to him, but I'm gonna have to answer. He is my friend. Yep. So I'm gonna do that. Well, I'll talk about it another time. Anyway, I gotta get some night, guys. I love you. Take care.
And welcome to the show, Mark Wilsh. I've got one of our guests coming up tonight, Michael Schratt. He was research over the years in aviation historian, and he does meticulous work in his investigations. And tonight we're going to be talking about UFO crash retrievals. It should be a very interesting show. Thank you all for coming up here. Thank you for those who show. Anyone can do that or podcast UFO under support the show. A couple of things. The blog this week is from Charles Lair, as usual. Wrote a report from Strasbourg, Germany. Talks about a lot of the work of Chris Hobback, who I've been trying to get on the show. Hopefully, I'll get him on one of these days. But it's a great article, and check that out over at podcastfo.com. A lot of you know this already. It's old news to most of you out there that pay attention to what's going on. But basically, the Schumer-Rouse Act was more or less gutted, unfortunately. And, something is passing, but it's very, very weak. And so it's, people say it's up to, all of us to push this thing along, and perhaps maybe with some more whistleblowers coming forward. I know someone sent me something saying to look for maybe Russia's bank coming out soon. It's going to be more revealing. I'm not sure. We'll see how all that goes. One of the things that came to mind is if one of the things that was gutted was the eminent domain and shorty hardware or anything that these private corporations like Lockheed Martin, places like that may hold. Maybe no, but all that was gutted, and my question is, why would it be gutted if there was nothing to hide? That maybe that's kind of conspiratorial, but it makes sense to me that if you have nothing to hide, they wouldn't care whether that was in there or not. Now, talking about the people that are funded, campaign funds that were involved in this from places like probably others, and us and the whistleblowers to try to get more answers, and hopefully that will happen. So I'm ready to bring people to the show.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you back. It's been a couple of years, and I really enjoyed the last time. And I remember the person that was doing it illustrating. Is that we're going to be seeing the same illustrations as people?
No, I've got 3 illustrators that I'm working with, and you'll see all of that tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So great. Do you want to go ahead and dive right into it? We can pull that right up. Okay. All right. Would you like me to make this a full page? Oh, just about it. Okay, I think we can see it pretty good. Yeah. I do. Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm gonna this presentation is called Treatments of the Third Kind, Cosmic Crashes Cover-Ups. And I want to kind of lay the groundwork here. And I always like to start here. UFO crash reveals the real of UFO research. Why am I calling it the whole? It's because it's very simple. Crash retrievals contain everything we need to see form. Now they just passed this filter legislation last week. So now it's really up to the whistleblowers and people who are in this field that are trying to release access to this part of this whole bodies, the debris, and the craft, because these are the 3 key elements that we're going to need to move this field forward, to bring this into commercial areas. This is the vehicle that is going to bring about disclosure. All right, a couple of announcements before we get into this here. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact for the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be predicted per administrator or agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated demonstrations and sketches, which originated from the specific details provided by lender sources. Sources for the material covered in this presentation. So here are the first-hand military sources that lenders used to basically compile his crash retrieval accounts. 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, commercial air troopers, pathologists, theoretical physicists, mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists, and engineers who work at Patterson Air Force Base and other aircraft facilities. So that's just a cross-section of the people that we'll be examining here tonight. A couple of quick quotes here. Number 1, the UFO retrievals can be real because if they were, I would have read about them. That's the general public. There are not or ever have been any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment aboard Patterson Air Force Base. This is the very old press release, July 1986. That's what they're saying. And what we're going to do here tonight is we're going to challenge them with our best top military witnesses. So it's going to be witnesses against this press release of the government. Let's see who comes out on top here. Okay, this is the gentleman that we're highlighting his work. Leonard Stringfield is the godfather of crash retrieval cases. Usually coined the term for crash retrievals. Over at least a 9-year period, he collected dozens. I counted 190 of these retrieval cases. That's what we're going to do. But biographical points here. Leonard Stringfield was born in 1920 from Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he had already memorized the entire dictionary. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor. Employed by a chemical company in Ohio. He wrote 2 books, one in 1957, one in 1977. Situation read the next one, his lecture on UFO crashes in 1978 caused pressure treatment is very early in that process. Wasn't really talked about. And the agreement that literally his first-hand witnesses is that he could retain history by getting the story out, but he could not use their names. And so that's where there was a little bit of pushback when he was at this symposium. He passed away December 18th, 1994. Okay, so this is Cincinnati Inquirer, July 19th, 1993. Continues on UFOs. What collected has this would be since really. And yes, actual contact to bring these craft, the actual thing, it is the biggest thing since this time. So that's what we're looking at now. Somewhere there, I believe there are 22 bed boxes of original letters, correspondence, drawings, tapes, sketches, illustrations. Leonard's first witnesses I know about 15 years ago was probably a six-figure sum offered for this collection, but it was turned down. I'm kind of on the track of this thing. I've been told that this has been thrown out, and Leonard only wanted some things published. Maybe that's true. I have reason to believe that we still see that. So, at the very least, there are 22 better boxes. Somewhere around 1991, track these original boxes down. So everything that we're talking about comes from here. UFO Retrievals, 1970 to 1994. So if anyone wants to follow along, I recommend if you're interested in the subject matter, reading this book on Amazon. It's $100. It's not cheap. It's relatively thick. It's not for the heart. There's a lot of technical pressure, bodies, covert operations, bringing these craft down the tractor trailer and shipping them to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, Dill Air Force. The interworking of these retrieval cases are examined and explained. And the page number, the case number, that's what I'm going to put. So, if you went to Vegas and you knew the odds were 119-1 in your favor, would you go to Vegas, Martin? What do you think?
I'd be on a jet, the next private jet I can find.
So we've got this. Let's just say there's 120 spaces here, and you bet 119. You're going to win every time. You almost cannot lose. I mean, the odds are in your favor. That's what we've got here. We've got 119 pressure retrieval cases. All we need is for one of these to be authentic. And then the whole concept about this whole thing being a non-event completely falls apart. All we need is one. So really the odds are in our favor here. I want to give credit to my artist, Rudy Gardea, who did all of the pencil sketches in this illustration. And we're going to start right here. This is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright Patterson Air Force Base because the Air Force didn't exist back in 1946. Now, this was a private. He worked in records management. And the book for this is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McCollum. This is the only time we're going to divert from this. But on page 59, this is the cover of the book here. Everyone's interested. And move forward to the sketch. Here's what this craft looked like. This is 1946. This is before this craft came in on a railroad flat car, Arkansas. It was 15 feet across, 7 feet high. It had a series of tiny wrapped around the upper circle. It was highly embellished, rear reflective. There was a central column that rose from the bottom of the craft all the way to the top. And when they looked inside, it was innocently sterile. Exterior skin. Before it had this chrome polished exterior finish to it. Basically, no seams. There were capsules. There were no weld marks. It looked like this thing was done on a 3D printer on an atomic level. So here's my technical drawing that shows you what this thing look at the upper right-hand corner of the skin, now you can see the central column that rose from the bottom all the way to the top. And this thing was 3 feet in diameter. That's the diameter of the central column. Looking in the graph, it appeared to be aniseptically sterile. Whatever display screens there was. I want to bring your attention to this red dot. And this is the attempted point of entry that these lab technicians worked through this military source. They were using a diamond tip drill trying to breach glass pane window, if you want to call it. That's what it was. They could not get in. So let's take everything. And this is my first pass color illustration of what this thing may look like. And then this is my friend Joseph Reed, who did a good job of doing a nice colorized version of this. If you look at the right hand, like this. Now you can see inside here. And they're using diamond tip to get inside. And they can't do it. They're desperately trying to reverse engineer the metallurgical technology and apply it to the aerospace industry. That's clearly what they're doing. And that's one reason why they totally canceled legislation. That's definitely one reason. So here is the drawing by Rudy that gives you an idea. So we have his he met a letter to one of these high groups at back. And this guy said, I got something for sure. So he brings it to as far as the city on the concrete floor of the hangar. There's a toolbox. It has an electric drill off to the left with a diamond tip drill. There's a folded tour off to the right on the bottom side. And he's just looking at this thing and can't believe what he's seeing. So I told my friend Joseph Ray, okay, we've got to do a color illustration. Everything from Ruby's sketch right here, everything together from the original sketch, from the eyewitness report, from his 2-page report, all put together. See if we can get there. There's no word. So here's what we came up with. This is the closest approximation that we get. Something that looks similar. It may still be there, or we may have assets or do another location. 46 military sources are telling us that that's most Indian reservation west of Blue Bears in 1947. And this is north of Superstition Mountains. This in the U.S. Navy during World War II. This is page 93. I've already talked about this case 82. And let's go to the drawing by Rudy. Two men are going down this unimproved area. It's this desert terrain. If you've been anywhere around the Superstition Mountains, you know it's pretty desert. And they come across these 2 MPs with carbides and about another 50 feet left. This foot diameter dish-shaped craft has a dome on top, 2 rims wrapped around the outer surface, and 10 sections wrapped around. Challenged about this. Yeah, they look at this thing and so you can. Now let's take this image and let's go with color right. And this is Joel B. I want to give him credit for this. This is the military operation ongoing. It's 1947. We haven't made the turn. If we factor in Cape Girardeau, factor in 1942, look at 5. This is the so at least 5. And we have Girardeau. Okay, so let's keep on. 1947. So now we're finally here. This is a U.S. Army Air Force. Page 196 in the book. Now, I've got the white sands perimeter shown up here, and I want to stress that this entire retrieval operation took place at night, and this an angle somewhat buried in the sand. And they had light bulbs, they brought in spotlights, they brought in high intensity lights, they had people with Geiger counters, they had people with experiments, they had pulling, and this is all the night they got these smart. Got picture film reel, still camera for probably photographs. So they got in our city and our have a high enough security coverage to know to get access to this information. That's where this brick wall keeps a number of cards in it. See, nice full color. This is one question. In a situation like this, they actually recover something like 150 wide. How can they possibly transport something? Okay, to in some of these cases, they find out that these things assemble in pie segments, and they put the pie in transport, and they one way they can do it. Okay. Lights, the tents, and you've got another thing too is when these things get too big, the logistics of living them are just too much. And Martin is opposing everything's and that's that multiple times as well. So this is the 07 white sand. Let's move on here. Here. Actionable item is photography picture film was appropriate security. Yeah. Next one. Retrieval was 1946. In a warehouse in Berkeley, place Albert Collins, that was the 16th primary witness in this case. He was a metallurgical engineer in the 60s. So here we've got this engineer. He's at the right place at the right time. This and this guy, and this he is seen according to the witness here. This was 8. It was 50. It had a inferior yoke, which was this. They had a panel and panel. Wrapped around the outer circle. Off to the right, there was the shrapnel, like a kicked out this debris. So here's number is this the entire craft itself. Whereas this propulsion system is powered. Where did they get this thing? And then the thing is, we talked about samples they had 3 inches by 6 inches. Access to some of that debris for analysis by the scientific. Impossible. Hey, maybe we could get a color rendering by Joe. And what this retrieval is. Now we're 5 or 6 inches. Right there. See that body count. And characters different. And the deal with the government here is they made a deal with the contractors and they said, I don't care what you do. You can commercialize this. Profit from it. I don't care what you have to do. Exploit the technology It's advancement like they always do. That's so my cup with the defense. Okay, next one. Louisiana. 1953. Private case 81 page. Very good case. It's a very simple shaped cross. It fin this kind of red embers still hot. They're still warm. What they're doing is at least military um, they were assisting through means craft with this book. Three comrades. Yeah. These things are 3.5 to 4 slip from nose, tight fitting flight suit. They had a helmet on, and then Martin, I'm not making it's wearing mittens, and then walking across this. They were walking with only their hip joints. Bizarre type way. That's what this talks about. So here is my full color rendering. Brown, it's this red dirt. I have to zoom in here so we can get a little bit better. But and the stretchers carrying him off the ambulance truck. But this whole concept of these one-piece tight-fitting flight suits that are full almost into the skin of the beings themselves, that keeps popping up again and again. An interesting technology here. Okay, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. This is a Army Reserves warrant officer. We have his name. His name is Michael. Final curtain on decision because and then the bottom of all this. So this really is the final curtain call. We've got to come together. 5 witnesses. Find us to the debris. So this is 1953. 15 abstract. So the scene here, they 4 cargo aircraft at night, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I believe it may have been this hangar complex here, number 4. I don't know for sure. And it might be this. So you've got cargo the scene taking place inside the hangar. The hangar bay shut, and there's a port aft cargo that opens out. Crates down, Martin. He's close enough to see as these folks come down. There's 3 wooden crates on top with their lids off. And he looked over inside. I want to take you inside this hangar now. They're wearing a one-piece flight suit, oversized eyes. One of them was female. They were all being supported off of the wooden crates with this white netting that protected them from the dry ice freezer burn below. And, he's watching this. He's looking at this. He's got a close enough view on all this. He later learned about the debris that came from the crash retrieval operation and full color illustration there, Joseph Ray, and this is what it looks like here. The best approximation that we can put together of what we're talking about here. I mean, it's just staggering the implications of what this means. They're keeping this information from the general public, from America, from all around the world. Can we handle this truth? I think at this point we can. We're going to examine this concept here. Now let's do a top view looking down. He did say that one of them had breasts, so it was his assumption that at least one of these was female, and they were wearing this one-piece tight-fitting flight suit that we've heard again and again. That keeps on popping up. So this is 1953, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. All right, let's go to the next one here. This is Walker.
And just a second there, it looked like they had opposable thumbs.
Yeah, in this case, yes.
Yeah. A question for you is, I was just thinking about my audio listeners because I have a vast, audio audience, and the only thing I can say is to go into the show notes and breeze through the video that will be in the show notes. I just wanted to get that out there because just these illustrations are really nice.
Can't take credit for it all. It's a united. Next one, Air Force Base in Mexico. Served in the Air Force 1954 to 1955. That's our source here. It's on page 82. So if you want more information, it's on page 82 of the book. Now, I want to keep this in mind. Walker Air Force Base used to be Roswell Army Airfield back in 1947. It later became Walker Air Force Base. So essentially, we're talking about the same place here. So this is 1954, and this particular witness, he was told to board an H-19 helicopter, like right now. So he jumps in this helicopter. This is at night. They take off. They head northbound. They make a left-hand turn. Now they're heading northwest toward Corona, like where the original crash was back in July 1947. So they're hovering over this scene. And on the starboard side of the helicopter, which is on the far side, he opens up this bay door and he's looking down at the scene. And what does he see? He sees this. This is a spotlight photo. So they've got those photos. He's just showing about what he's seeing. The helicopter, where this craft was. First thing, this that's the first thing. And then they noticed that absolutely first I decided there were two more bodies, so they had 6 retrieval operations around the outer circumference of the. Let's go to the next color. I have an idea what this thing was. And again, this just keeps on as the years progress. It appears that all of in this case, all of the right person was basically there does appear to be some good evidence that they started the worst assets being shipped to other locations like Eglin. Just 3 examples. Okay, next one. December 1963. U.S. Marine. Now, in this case, it shows the vertices. This is just North Carolina. So the plane was 3 hours from North Carolina to the location. was he looked inside, saw this, and this was probably it was a 40 hamburger shape. It had outer circumference. Oh, you see really good inside. There was a bunch between itself and of these. It was a cream polish, really. No cap screws, no nothing like that. Now, he did say that there was just a very hint, call it that, not put a razor blade, but in this case, they were taking a diabetic trip, they were trying to pierce the skin, couldn't do it. So this is the second time we've heard about this. Here is Joseph Ray's illustration that shows you all the two ideas are the accepted. So they were trying to drill into where the seams didn't work. So let's move to the next one here. And these are avenues that they want the diabetic treatment, and then they try to settle into that, and then the final opportunity that see here. About 7 years. That's pretty university here. Fighters, bombers, things that they talk about. That's what they're trying to do. This is a sketch by the it's not a copy of someone's drawing. This is absolutely me who actually started this thing. The previous support by the sketch. It's a rough sketch. It's got some good things here. Right. Propped up off the hand. They've got these lights, and he said that excruciatingly well. It's one thing to do internal operation, and you're trying to risk technology of these things. You can very well lit. Now, if you look at these black sections, those are the pads. To the second to the left window, that is one of these entryway points that they failed. So let's Michael Johnston's drawing. This was done in 1986. He interviewed Broadway back in 1986. So this is a little bit refined drawing. So craft work is see this 1-inch lip. 1-inch lip. So let's end up drawing here and see how this thing comes. And just a couple of things. Number one, to the floor, crack. No one. So you're talking. Came over to the next this brings to shoot later. A team toward the interior. That's what we have with this. Next one here, this Joseph. Now we can see what we're actually doing. This is like the and you can see that the catwalk about is they had a know that here you had access. If you had access to the entire facility, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, this was the first pass color illustration, and you can see here when the report says that the two trailers led these heavy gauge cables that were shining a laser craft to the side, and when they away, it was warm to the touch, but had no effect. So, the kind of material that you want us to work between you. Okay, next one now. Fly. And we're going to get access to classified super diameter, tall, you've got elliptically shaped. You see there, team, you've got military personnel, you've got the white lab coat technicians, and anyone shot right on the spot, no question about it. Okay, so we've got some spook groups. Like I said before, we're already 5, 6, 7, 8 into this already, and these just keep windows, you 1-inch lip, now exaggerated seams in here so that you can just get approximately 45 degrees. It's all coming into view here. I'm sure that scaffold, catwalk, these things, and this happens again.
Is there ever any talk in how this thing was out? Nope.
There was no mention of Roy Baker. No, he was never great. His job. This thing December. This is literally a week and a half, 2 weeks after. No, he was never told how they got it, and he was never told where it went when it left.
Yeah, that's the next question. And the thing, it was people's opinions. I'm sure you hear this too. How could these things get here? Why would they crash here? They can get here from, but it just seems like there's a lot more than I was ever aware of that reported crashes.
I agree, and a very good case. A lot of these instances, industrial things down. They're trying to reverse engineer the technologies, ocean systems, and the free energy systems. We see the evidence is now. He said taking this the scale. They have built this cradles. 18 on this cradle, and then return so she built and beginning this and then the cradle system was start. So now 50% credit. This was like the last time you ever saw this. So now, facility, the next locations, the two ways that they keep it safe. They compartmentalize this. No one person knows. don't see any. So that now it tags. So this was from these. This was the first drawing just to give an idea of shipping this. Right, he said that and he turned the sleeves around this facility. This in great detail. Right, damaged this tile. Here's
Now, in 1963, did we have that? Did we have really?
that is the date, and I've heard this before. I'm going directly and stated 1963. They were in their infancy time frame, but apparently we did have intensity, but at the very least, adhering to the correct data ranger. Here's his sketch. Touching off and then the damage to the upper section of the ceiling tile here. Here's these color coded badges off to the left. Technicians. Green badge gave you access to the facility. Badge you could look at it, or you could go under the crap. Red badge gave you complete access to the entire facility. Definitely mentioned in the notes that I got from Michael Johnson about 3 pages of detailed handwritten notes about this whole operation. He talked about the color-coded badges. He talked about the all of this is within the original notes. Now, he did say that when he was guarding this craft for a period of and it shakedown this whole area. One time where no so he his camera and he took of this thing. This is his direct quote. Someday I will tell the story that people are going like unfortunately. Earth was back in 1983. So a good piece of evidence. This keeps happening and again. So for my friend, let's see if we can replica this camera look like if we were there. And this is so it's got this great to it. This is the best representation based on the time frame, the type of camera, but best replica. Now, he said that there was a secretary in the Navy who stepped circle. 1963. Who was the secretary of December 1963? Gentleman Paul. I can't guarantee 100 who did was the secretary. Had been in the he would have some part of all of General plays an interesting part of his story. He was basically on a team hours and got his own mention for ex-team commander July of 1986. Now, why am I bringing this up? Why am I switching gears to this team? Well, this journal was very friends with Charlotte. People, Charlotte, go at IU of Phoenix. She took it. I was there.
actually had her.
Okay, well, there. She held the photo of she and she with UFOs with milk friends, and they both had interest. Got this interest in UFOs, and you little so he turns to Charlotte. And he says, Charlotte, tell you, the general told Charlotte he saw a UFO located in the west. It tracks with the Marine we just talked about. Very point 3 hours that puts you within the west. Walk, walk, now we got 2 pieces. 3 are recovered in facility. December. Her I see right now. This Marine, this general, I'm sure I have a good feeling that he didn't know about this. I can confirm this information basically describing the identical features. So I think this Marine talked about and almost like the identical characteristics. Next one. Primary air in Quebec, served infantry. This is National Retreat, page 24 by Leonard. This is camp site where this thing came down. This troop transport with they were about a half mile down this road. They're all toward. This is all into this crystal, this whole entire area with a spotlight shining down. Got there. This is what they saw. This is a 40. These box-like or circumference, tall, and had what looked like a fin that below the fin mark there was what looked like an exhaust. To get this thing actually looks like this is back in '64. What the scene you can see on the lower right hand, the gentleman with a dagger. This he actually was told to guard this thing overnight. You got to look at this thing up close. Tree will up there. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take it to the next level. Let's go to full color to give you an idea of what this made of. Now, you can call them NIDs at this facility, military facility. You've got the, you can see this. You can also see this exhaust port. And if you look closely, you can see these box-like structures that wrap around the outer surface. Illustration can be a different angle. A little bit different angle. This kind of angle, but still off to the left just slightly. We can kind of see this exhaust back. So as we continue to go through these, it's just mind-boggling how just the only reason this case is because there was a second M1 train here. He was coming at the opposite direction. He saw the same craft.
Interrupt just for a second. I have to say the hard stop here. Thank you all at KGR Radio. See you next week. Now we continue on.
Yeah. So he saw the same craft that our witness saw. This thing was not his trailer. On top, machines were he was being ordered. So we had two sources that confirmed this aircraft coming to his vicinity. And people on the trailer, biological hazard objectives, next one. This is a very bizarre case because it's this whole 1965 Air Force. And anyone who wants to play on all of this can actually today. Actually, in this case, there was a couple that was looking at the two pockets. This is the exact same V2 pocket that they were looking at. So you got this husband and wife. They're just looking at this V2 pocket. The husband is stranded by the he starts wandering off back halls of the Air Force. He busts through corridors of the he busts through these off-limits double doors. He's the shock of his life. He's about 3.5 feet tall, very large head, very large brow ridge. And this guy is this thing is bringing those seeing this Air Force Base, but connecting to where he escaped. 10 seconds later, all these sirens, lights going off in the Air Force Base. Peace. And so that's what Moon is drawn here. So this being that accidentally brought out of his containment. It's part of the next one. Right, Patterson Air Force Base, 1966. This is made in 17F. Civil service. He had just come home from work. His son was still up. And he had a trench coat on. He said, you know what? I got something I want to show you. So he reached inside his breast pocket. And there was a deceased ET piece suit. It was about 30 feet tall. Being propped up by its wrist by two was this coated mission. It was khakis and military boots. He is just shocked at what his father is showing him. He can't believe it. The next morning, his father back to the base. He was discovered. He was being tracked down. He was fired. They did not develop this contract. We talked about this maybe in Southwestern Sea, so we couldn't hear it. One of the two absolutely was a southwestern landscape in the background. So this could have been some Southwest July 1967. was told to go back in 1967. This is page 86, 85. You can see this style prefabricated, and by the third day, got an aircraft. And you look at something that's supposed to do this, you just couldn't stand there. What downwardly shipwreck, home on top. Tables, lab technician, there was micrometers, there were calipers out there. Um, there was a walk-in freezer, and there were body freezer. He did not said walk-in freezer. There was eventually inside. And so, in a nutshell, that's this case from July 13th. Let's go to the just people what these make like something. The credit itself. What these contouring, composite curvature. There's no. This are telling us. With military industrial contractors, universities, of these particular. All right, next one. Late, I believe, pilot. Now, I want to highlight in there's a place called Airfield. There is a room. Our landing, he was in 170. This sketch here. Got the 170. Literally within, he pulls up 2 MPs. Both pull out their 4 to the 172. Out of the plane now. A while so I passed feet across. So on top. Rocks on their head. You could call it cleansing, let alone that there's you could see what looked like. He also said that there looked like monitoring this. They were going back and forth. Reports that there are UFOs from gray army that are being tested encounters so that CH-47 elevator is absolutely consistent with what witnesses are telling us. So if we take it back in time, right from 1966, we've cracked time, actual engine crack, any number of vehicles. This looks to be around staging for test flights. Escort getting these things. Is there a top secret vest on this is our telling us and this is all Tommy Blond, who's a researcher, he interviewed someone called X. It's on page 100, I think. Here's what he says. Stated. Isolated areas of reservations. have a UFO that had a malfunction. Does anything come to mind?
Oh yes.
Good. Well done. Okay, good.
Yeah.
We're here.
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh, sure.
I remember when I had way back.
Now the next one, our colonel said here. I'm some of us. It is so saying that double 47 now. Actually, this is December. So we've got outbound, already given up. So they're only it was bigger and bigger, sudden, almost like daylight. And they see this 9-foot tall large ends the flat section, 2 miles. Was chopped off. It was chopped off. Craft kept by this time, there she cargo. She stood there watching us for at least minutes. So was off to the and Colby and the frame of he walks back to the car, grabs the by the time they both got in winter time, it's so boiling hot. It's cold. Not here. Is that down in front of me? It was Betty's down the brakes. Forward, putting your hands on the deck. And if this is still alive, that's a piece of physics that was now helicopter one sequence after this thing just like the in minutes of dropping the they threw completely. He's no longer with us. Vic is no longer with us. Army Corps of Engineers. 2 weeks later, Army Corps and then repay. We got some answers to the craft inside the reactor material, and they were got this radiation poisoning. Now, that appears to be what the steps got here. Here is the Florida Today, December 4th, 1983. You can see X marks the spot here where this all went down. So here is our full rendering by Joel Payne. This is what this underground runway may look like. Now, in the report, it also talks about cargo planes, C-130s, land cargo planes in here. More than likely, you could land F-16s, F-15s in here if you had to. Other helicopters, so this just goes to show that there is a massive underground going on beneath our noses that are being marked as classified.
Move on. Just call him every now and put out there publicly. I mean, I wouldn't say this, but I mean, I think he's having some issues. To celebrate anything else that they care about. Right, it has to be something great. And what about the vegetation?
Yeah, I know. I'm sure that the bark on the trees and the surrounding vegetation and brush was also just all over the entire area. And here's the other thing: there's 23 double rotor trees, each one or more, plus the plus the Sikorsky sky crane. Looking at least 100 personnel, and I don't think that they were shielded the whole time. I don't know, but there's another avenue to follow up on.
So your thoughts on this is maybe some engineered craft or some pickup craft, but it was unlike a nuclear.
Well, according to John Schuster, and according to, and I don't know how much we should believe, Richard, basically talking about it's an ET pilots on board that had a retrofitted man-made propulsion system. Now, I man-made aspect all the way. Technically, it could be either, but leaning much more toward a completely with potential pilots on board with an atomic engine that had friction reactor, and that's what this thing actually is. And then the other thing to point out is that after all this was over, the Air Force tried to buy this car. That's another thing. Why would the Air Force be interested in Betty's car? For no reason at all. Doesn't make any sense. Yep.
That's something.
All right, so California City, summer 1971. Primary eyewitness is Debbie Clayton. This is page 233 in the book. And basically what they hear is this large booming noise. And this was a kind of a tight-knit community. There weren't too many people here at that local vicinity back in 1971. So there were about 4 witnesses that go down to the edge of the block, and they see this 10-foot wide by 5-foot tall dish-shaped craft that has a mushroom top that rolls around, kind of got this mushroom appearance. Within minutes, there was a military convoy that showed up that had kind of a tank transporter. I wouldn't call it exactly that, but definitely a 6x6 troop transporter. There was a trailer with an attached crane. They set up a lanyard system with an eye hook, and then they brought that back onto the back of the trailer. Now, while all this is going on, before the military got there, one of the witnesses had a handheld camera, and he was taking photographs of this whole operation. When this Air Force brass got to these witnesses, he threw that camera down and told these guys to get out of here immediately. But they saw this whole retrieval operation. Okay, next one. And how much time do we have here, Martin?
We can keep going until we wrap this up as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so we'll do a couple more do a couple more cases here. So this is Morton Air Force Base, 1973, and this is an Air Force photographer who was stationed in Hawaii at the time. He had his security clearance upgraded. He was flown to Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, California. He was joined by another Air Force photographer. They get inside this vehicle. They travel about an hour from Norton Air Force Base, and then the car stops, completely stops. And they drop down into this underground facility. They're told to exit the vehicle. They go into another room in this underground facility. They're told to disrobe completely nude and go into these medical smocks, these white medical smocks that covers their entire body up to their faces, and then there's like a face covering here that's got a section here. And once they come out, they're led into this large underground facility, and this is what they see. They see this crane. So while you're running your device, this is a 30-foot dish-shaped craft, and they're both told to go into a cherry picker and go inside the entryway of this craft and start photographing the interior of the craft. Now, I want to mention that this gentleman said that the craft was 30 feet down, but when he got inside the craft part, he said, quote, I could have thrown a football as good and not hit the other side. So there's something going on within the interior of this craft. There's a gravity well, there's an optical warping going on. Gravity, space, and time that allows the interior to appear 10 times larger than the exterior. That absolutely happens. So when we enlargement here, I told Rudy to something that shows the large vastness of this craft. So he was taking photographs of the interior panels, the display screens. When they were done taking photographs of the interior, he said they were another to autopsy of 3 ET bodies. He mentioned that as well. So that's all within this case here. So now what I'm going to do is take you inside this underground facility. We've got an overhead in this particular case with this netting, and this thing's here's a little bit larger detail. Now inside the craft itself, here's what my friend Joseph Ray came up with. Now, in this case, you could throw a football not hit the other side. This may have been what it looked like when this gentleman was inside photographing your. This is what this is. This is not an isolated incident. There are other cases that also talk about materials are at least 10 times larger than the exterior dimension. Okay, so
many times over the years. And it's like, something like 30 feet wide and they go in and it just expands on and on. And I think, the Travis Walton talks about, this whole strange thing after he wakes up and everything, all the expanse of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's not an isolated case. Others talk about this in historical cases as well. All right, so then of course they started digging, right? Do we have any proof of these underground facilities? So here is the LA Times, June 11th, 1972, tube shuttle using electromagnetic suspension. It says here, LA in half an hour, 10,000 an hour train plan developed. Here's the detailed view of the cutaway. You can see these vacuum pumps, coils. They talk about details of how they're doing this. So then I started digging even further to try to support this case. This is Rand Corporation Proceedings of the Second Protective Construction Underground Construction, Volume 2, March 24th, 2015. The Rand Corporation. These are their own documents here. Here's what they say. Just as airplanes, ships, and automobiles have given man massive tunnel boring machines and shaft sinkers will have access to the subterranean world. It is our aim mining and construction of underground facilities. Bottom line, at least by 19 are already about this underground world. These tunnels, It's already done. How all of the base, all of the internal systems. There's no telling how.
Yeah, those boring machines are something else. I've seen some documentaries on scary. They really could keep tunneling, and I just don't understand what happens to you know rocks and everything like that. It's sort of like a melting type of situation there too. So
Yes. Patents of the nuclear powered tunnel boring machines that melt the debris into glass that makes up the interior walls of the craft. We've heard of those. We've seen those patents. So that checks out as well. Actionable items. Senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should locate this facility, find out what is stored there and what current installation is connected to. Yeah, that needs to happen. That needs to happen. We just hit last week regarding legislations. How it's even more important that these witnesses come forward. We need to, again, this is the fight. Management decision. U.S. Navy Marine Fiber in 1991. 50% triangle at a depth of 1.5 miles. Now, like,
finally, we
triangle shaped craft 1.5 miles down. So they notice that there's radiation coming from this area. They go on a DSRV, they drop down to 1.5 miles, and they see this triangular shaped craft. Sorry. They do retrieve this thing, but before they do, they it's buried within the silt about probably between 3 to 4 feet. Approximately 40 to 50 years has been sitting there at the bottom of the ocean. So they bring this thing up. They see that it has these hieroglyphics on the side itself. Here's Joe's illustration that shows what this thing looks like. This is just retrieval operations. Well, the size of an F-14. That's the way they describe it in this report. But we've got one of these deep sea fish here. But just to give you an idea of these things are at the bottom of the ocean. And later, if we have time, we'll want to be retrieved. Okay, next one. McClellan Air Force Base, 1973. Chris Kofi, pilot, astronaut Ellis Ozuka. This is page 153 in the book. This is we've got Ellison Ozuka, who at this time was a test pilot. They're at McClellan Air Force Base. This is near Sacramento, California. They go into a briefing room, and this is Ellison and Ozuka here. They go into this briefing room. There's about 12 other pilots there. And there's a general, Air Force general, sitting in the back of a movie projector. All the lights go down. The movie projector's turned on, and on this forward wall is this 3 to 5 minute black and white film clip of 2 ET bodies on slabs. And Ellison is thinking, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. He's like shocked about all this. He can't believe what he's seeing here. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. And reference this open minds. This is at the same facility. This is David Armstrong claims his honor was to work for a UFO Records Library at McClellan Air Force Base in his 20s to visit her. Interesting stuff. Armstrong says his aunt would take a look at the files. So here we've got 2 independent sources that are essentially confirming that photographs, 8 by 10 black and whites, motion picture. One time stored at a classified level at McClellan Air Force Base. Now, later, Ellison Ozuka became an astronaut, and 2 weeks after was going to enter. So they had this interview all set up, they had the date picked out. He was going to tell Leonard Springfield all about this motion picture building back at McClellan. 1973. But unfortunately, Mark lost him in the Challenger accident back in January 28th, 1986.
Oh, wow.
So we were this close of getting the testimony of an astronaut who saw black and white of an ET, two ETs on concrete slabs. Now, when that film was over, the lights went back on. There was no debrief, and then they all walked out. So it looks like what this is, it is a trial, and they're trying to gauge the reaction of our top military pilots. Could they handle this new reality, or would they collapse under this new reality? Could they handle this new paradigm shifting reality? That's what appears to be happening, because within the book, if you read this book, this film pops up between 3 and 5 different locations all around the country. And so it looks like they ship this thing all around, and they bring these military pilots into these facilities, and they do these unannounced movies with no debrief. And then afterward, they're told almost nothing about this, or they're told what you just saw was a hoax and forget all about it. That's what's going on here. It's confirmed by at least 5 separate cases within the book. All right, next one. 1974. We'll do a couple more here. This is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1974, page 327. Now, primary eyewitness had just given her 2-week notice, and she's at a dinner party engagement. Her new boss is coincidentally also at this same dinner party, and her boss can tell that her new hire is getting beat up in this dinner party engagement because they're talking about UFOs, and she's getting beat up. So he turns to her and he says, "Do you want to see the physical evidence?" And she says to him, "Now?" And he says, "Yeah, now." So he takes her in his car. They drive to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He had the correct security clearance to go through this magnetic card key entryway. They walk down this long corridor. There's another key entryway section, so he brings out his card one more time with a magnetic strip on it. He inserts it into this reader, and this door opens up, leading them down another corridor into an underground ward that has all these handles and doors that open up. So he pulls on one of these handles, and then off on this, call it a chassis and roller, comes out this table with this ET body half out of a zipper body bag. This thing was about 4 feet tall, the same oversized head, oversized eyes, slit front mouth, minute nose, and she's looking at this thing. Basically, the eyes are somewhat open, and she can't believe what she's seeing here. She's absolutely shocked. You can imagine she's just like totally in shock. So he brings her back into his vehicle. He drives her home. On the way home, she's just contemplating this whole new reality that she's learned about. She's shocked to her absolute core. Now, when her 2 weeks is up, because she had already given her 2-week notice, on the Monday morning that she's supposed to report to work, she talks to the office manager, and the office manager tells her, "I'm sorry, miss, but your boss died about 2 weeks ago, and there's no mention of him in the obituaries within the local newspapers. So something happened to this guy. Maybe he spoke too soon. He got her into the haunted village. He wasn't supposed to bring her. But this guy, it appears he was terminated for what he did. So this is something to be aware of. I mean, when you play with a varsity team here, and you're dealing with physical evidence, now you're on a completely different ball field here. This is, you're playing with the big boys now, and they do not relinquish their crown jewels easily to anyone. There's a price to be paid for this kind of stuff, and that's.
Well, I'm sure if he's using an electric, card, that they know that he accessed it.
Absolutely. So this is what this lady described on this bizarre night that she went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So when you look at all these cases, Martin, and you've got military personnel, you've got people who handled the bodies, you've got people who drove these things into the base, you've got other witnesses who saw DC-7 4-engine cargo transport planes enter these facilities. It's coming in from all different angles here, and they're all converging on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is exactly what Barry Goldwater had talked about to Curtis LeMay. And he said, General, I know you guys have a room in this base where you keep all of this material, the bodies, the debris, the craft, gun camera footage, motion picture film reels, glossy film. Can I go in there? So he turns to Barry and says, damn it, Barry, don't you ever ask me that question again, because if you do, I'll be court-martialed. And basically, he shut the whole thing down. That's the only time he ever got mad at Barry. But that's how it went down. So if there's nothing to any of this, why would General LeMay go off on Barry Goldwater? What was he trying to hide if he couldn't even get in there? These questions just keep on asking. And, maybe one or two of these witnesses, maybe they're hoaxing. Maybe they're just telling a lie. But when you take 119 first-hand military witnesses that keep telling us about the bodies, the debris, you cannot tell me that all 119 are lying. Why would this lady lie? I mean, she just shows up at work not knowing anything about what she's going to be told within the next 60 seconds. And then she finds out about this new real. Why would she lie? No, I tend to trust. And we've got other reference librarians are telling us, people who worked at cataloging bases within Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, they're telling us about this. Okay, we'll do a couple more here. This is late 1950s Air Force pilot Ed Kamarek. He saw a 5 to 6 minute film clip that depicted a large 60-foot diameter dish-shaped craft in a military hangar. There were 3 bodies off to the right that had kind of what looked like covers on them. There was a hull breach on the upper section of the dome. They showed the propulsion system and what appeared to be buttons, switches, dials, and levers, and a display screen on the inside. This is coming from this Air Force pilot, 1950s time frame. Here's an enlarged version of both the propulsion system and the display panel on the inside wall of the craft itself. One or two more here. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, 1962. This is 354th Tactical Air Command Fighter Wing, page 88, case A6. And so these joggers, who are the fighter pilots, are our primary eyewitness. He's in charge of their health. So they're out on a morning run. They're working down these rows of hangars. They look off to the right. One of these hangar doors is open. They run inside, and they see this 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that they describe as 2 track and field discus put together with the rims touching each other. It was being propped up off the hangar floor by 2 engine test stands. They had a roped-off section with military personnel with carbides, and they're challenging these joggers, and they're basically saying, you know what, you guys aren't allowed here. Get out of here immediately. Now, I want to go to what this pilot said here, which I think is very interesting. Here's what it says within the publication. The guard challenged by saying, quote, I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir. I replied to the affirmative, and we turned about face and departed, mumbling to ourselves that the good old U.S. had developed, or had all along, flying saucers in service. Now, when you have 5 fighter pilots who saw this, and one of them comes forward, I think that they make good witnesses. I don't think they're lying. And we've got other reports from pilots that have seen things tucked away in hangars at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So these are what these military witnesses are telling us here. Okay, Roswell, the other Roswell, Noe Torres and my good friend Ruben are the primary researchers on this case. This is spring 1955, and this is just across the Texas-Mexican border south of Del Rio, Texas. So here you see this F-86. I'm going to set this scene up. We've got at least 2 B-47s and at least 3 F-86s. They're heading westbound over southern Texas. And here's the map. And all of a sudden, a dish-shaped craft comes screaming right past their flight path. So one of the F-86s breaks away, and you can see the map here. You've got Del Rio, and then you've got the Rio Grande River. So just south of the Rio Grande River is where this craft came down. So one of these F-86s, he pulls away from the group, and I'm going to go back 2 slides here, and He does a slow pass over the scene, and he sees this disc-shaped craft here. He makes a left-hand turn heading northbound. He lands at Carswell Air Force Base, gets out of the F-86. He drives to a civilian airport called Corsica. He gets in a two-seat tandem tail dragger Aranca with a friend, and they fly back to the crash site before it gets dark. So I'm going to move forward here, and this is what they saw when they landed. This was about 25 feet in diameter. It was 5 feet tall. This is a drawing by Rudy. The dome had popped up off the upper portion of the craft itself. There was a hull breach on the side of the craft. When this came in, it left a debris trail, and the primary eyewitness said that the Mexican military, because it was a cold day and it was getting toward nighttime, they were going inside the 6x6 troop transport that you see off to the left here. And they were taking out blankets, and they were laying these blankets onto the warm debris from the crash site. And then once the blankets were warm, they were putting them on their bodies just to warm them up. This is what the witness told our researcher, and then that made it into the book here. Now, here's a blow-up. This is from Air Force pilot Robert Willing, and he described the bodies, and he said, quote, they had arms that looked like broomsticks. So now I want to take you to the full-color rendering. And now you can see what this whole entire scene, this is by Joe Payne, what it looks like. You can see the Aranca in the foreground right. You've got the troop transport. You've got the hull breach on the side of the craft. You've got the dome of the craft popped off. You've got the hot debris here. And what I want to do, Martin, is I want to take you inside the craft now to give you kind of a gruesome view of the ET beings that had an unfortunate end here. It did not end well for them. Kind of like charred and burned, dismembered body. It was not a friendly sight. It was a gruesome sight. But this is what this Air Force pilot is telling us here. Okay, next one. Koyame incident. Noe, Torres, and Ruben again. Fantastic job. This is August 25th, 1974, Koyame, Mexico. So there was a disc-shaped craft that was very high altitude, over 70,000 feet. It dropped down to the same level as a Cessna 172 that was heading southbound over southern Texas, and there was a mid-air collision. Here you see the map here, and off to the left it says Koyame, Mexico. Difficult to describe, but this craft was going 2,530 miles an hour, and there was a mid-air collision because it dropped down to the same altitude as the 172 did. And we want to go to the next slide, and while all this is going on, the Mexican military is in the midst of this retrieval operation. Elements of the United States intelligence agencies were monitoring the radio traffic from the Mexican soldiers. So the National Security Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency, they were monitoring all this radio traffic. And this is what the scene looked like. They put the craft on a trailer with a tractor. They had a troop transport and a Jeep up front, and they're transporting this disc-shaped craft down this unimproved road. And Martin, do you know what happens next? Any idea?
Is this the one where the military comes in?
Well, this is the case.
I mean, like there's a confrontation.
Well, the Mexican military stops dead. The convoy stops dead, and there are military personnel that are slumped over on the steering wheel.
Oh, yeah.
They're half in and outside of the vehicle. They're laying forward on the driver's side of the vehicle. Some of the other soldiers were laying dead on the ground next to the Jeeps. All of the Mexican military were dead. And so we believe, according to Ruben and Noe, that there was a biological agent toxic to humans that was associated with this craft. So we had 2 UH-1 helicopters and 1 CH-53 Sea Stallion fly in. All of our boys are, because they had a whole heads up on this, they had a clue about all this because they were monitoring the radio traffic. So they come in with the CH-53 Sea Stallion. They attach this lanyard ropes to this craft. They hoist it up, and they ship this thing to CDC headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, it took multiple refuelings to get there, but that's where it was brought according to Ruben. So I want to go over just the helicopters in review here. You've got 3 Bell UH-1s, 1 CH-53C stand that are part of this retrieval operation. So let's go to the color illustration just to give everybody an idea of what this retrieval operation looked like. So now we've got the CH-53. We've got the dead Mexican soldiers next to the vehicle convoy. This craft has already been lifted off the trailer, and they're moving it to CDC headquarters. Now let's do a 60-degree angle look down just to give people an idea of what this may have looked like if we were there and were a part of the scene. So these are the kind of operations, Martin, that represent the deepest, darkest secrets of the military intelligence defense contractor community, because we're stealing these assets right up from under the noses of another government. So these are some more of the deep black programs within the military industrial complex. So I just wanted to go over a couple of these cases with you, Martin, and it's clear that a lot of this information needs to come out with congressional hearings. We have enough research material and sources to track down these witnesses. Those witnesses could absolutely lead to their bosses, and that would eventually lead to these underground facilities where the bodies and the craft and the debris are being kept. And those types of pieces of evidence need to come forward in congressional hearings so that we can get this out into the public domain. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Michael. And you think about this. I believe you said 119, and you think about all we need is one.
That's all we need is one. Yep.
We just need one to get out there and to actually be explained.
That's right.
It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for your amazing work.
Oh, no problem. No problem. That's great. Always good to be with.
Yeah. All right. You take care now.
Okay. Thanks. Take care.
All right. Sure. Yeah. Bye. All right, everyone. We'll be back next week. I've been hoping to get a confirmation from my guests before this evening, but I do not. So if you'd like to sign up on our mailing list, just go to podcastufo.com, or I believe if you are in the live chat right now, pinned to the top is where our newsletter is. So we have the upcoming guests and also blogs. So thank you so much for hanging in. And remember, if you are listening to the audio, I might try to put some pictures into the show notes, but at any rate, you can check out the video. That YouTube video will be right in the show notes, and you can check that out for, so you can get a visual of the things that we're talking about tonight. Thanks so much, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
Do you think he is incompetent, insane, or evil? The following is a conversation with CoffeeZilla, an investigator and journalist exposing frauds, scams, and fake gurus. He's one of the most important journalistic voices we have working today, both in terms of his integrity and fearlessness in the pursuit of truth. Please follow, watch, and support his work at youtube.com/CoffeeZilla. This is the Les Friedman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's CoffeeZilla. How do you like your coffee? Dark and soul-crushing? That was the number one question on the internet. Do you like your coffee to reverberate deeply through the worst of human nature? Is that how you drink your coffee?
I've gone through a lot of phases on coffee. I used to, in college, I would go super deep into, grinding fresh beans, all of that kind of stuff, water temperature exactly right. And then I hit a phase where it was the maintenance dose. Then I went to espresso because I could get a lot more in.
Yeah.
And now I go through phases of sometimes I like it with a little oat milk, sometimes a little half and half in sugar.
Well, you've gotten soft in your old age.
I've gone a little, I have. But hey, if I'm doing a SBF interview, it's black that day, nothing less.
Yeah.
It's black, no sugar.
The lights go down. What do you actually do in those situations, leading up to a show? Do you get hyped up Like, how do you put yourself in the right mind space to explore some of these really difficult topics?
I think a lot of it's preparation, and then once it happens, it's mostly fueled by sort of adrenaline, I would say. I really deeply care about getting to like the root cause of some of these issues, because I think so often people in positions of power are let off the hook. So I really care about holding their feet to the fire, and it translates into like a lot of energy the day of. So I never find myself, like, funny enough, I usually drink a lot of caffeine leading up to the interview, and then I try to drink like minimum the day of, because I have so much adrenaline. I don't want to be like hyper stimulated.
I have to say, of all the recent guests I've had, the energy you had when you walked into the door was
I'm
pretty
excited.
intense.
People not excited to be here.
I don't know. I think they're scared.
Deal, Lex.
I think they're scared.
I don't know if you
I felt
know.
like you were going to knock down the door or something. You were very excited. Like that just energy. It was terrifying because I'm terrified of social interaction. Anyway, speaking of terrifying,
You chose a good living at interviewing people.
face your fears, my friend. So let's talk about SBF and FTX. Who is Sam Bankman-Fried? Can you tell a story from the beginning as you understand it?
Yeah, so Sam Bankman-Fried is a kid who grew up sort of from a position of huge privilege. Both his parents are lawyers. I believe both of them were from Harvard. He went to MIT, backing up a bit more, he went to like this top prep high school, then to MIT, then he went to Jane Street, and after that, he started a trading firm in, I think, 2017 called Alameda Research with a few friends. Some of them were from Jane Street, some of them worked at Google, and they were sort of the smartest kids on the block, or that's what everyone thought. They made a lot of their money on something called the kimchi premium, or at least the story goes, which, just to explain that, the price of Bitcoin in Korea was substantially higher than in the rest of the world. And so you could arbitrage that by buying Bitcoin elsewhere and selling it on a Korean exchange. So they made their money early, doing kind of smart trades like that. They flipped that into market making, which they were pretty early on that. Just providing liquidity to an exchange, and it's a strategy that is considered delta neutral, which means basically if you take kind of both sides of the trade and you're making a spread, like a fee on that, you make money whether it goes up or down. So in theory, there shouldn't be that much risk associated with it. So Alameda kind of blew up because they would offer these people, people who are giving out loans, they'd say, hey, we'll give you this really attractive rate of return, and we're doing strategies that seemingly are low risk. So we're a low risk bet. We're these smart kids from Jane Street, and you can kind of trust us to be just smarter than everyone else. Kind of thing. Around 2019, Sam started FTX, which is an exchange. Specifically, it specialized in derivatives, so like margins, kind of more sophisticated crypto products. And it got in with Binance early on. So Binance actually has a prior relationship to FTX, which we'll explore in a second because they're going to play a role in FTX's collapse, actually. Binance is the number one crypto exchange, and they're led by, he's called CZ on Twitter. I don't want to butcher his full name. But really smart guy, has played his hand really well and built up a quite large exchange. And Binance was funding a bunch of different startups. So they helped invest into FTX early on. They invested $100 million. So these guys were kind of like teammates early on, SBF and CZ. And FTX quickly grew. They got especially in 2020, 2021, they got a lot of endorsements. They got a lot of credibility in the space. And eventually FTX actually bought out Binance. They gave him $2 billion. So pretty good investment for CZ in a couple of years. And now lead that up to 2022. What happens? Luna collapse, Three Arrows Capital collapse, which if you don't know, there's just these kind of cataclysmic events in crypto led by some pretty risky behavior, whether Luna was a token that promised really attractive returns that were unsustainable ultimately, and it just kind of spiraled. It did what's called a stablecoin death spiral, which we can talk about if we need to.
Stablecoin death spiral. I can't wait till that actually enters the lexicon, like a Wikipedia page on it, economic students are learning in a school.
Yeah,
there's a chapter in a book. Anyway, this is the reality of our world. This is a really big part of the economic system. Is cryptocurrency and stablecoin is part of that?
Yeah, it's weird because on the one hand, cryptocurrency is supposed to somewhat simplify or add transparency to the financial markets. The idea is for the first time, you don't have to wait for an SEC filing from some corporate business. You can look at what they're doing on chain, right? So that's good because a lot of big financial problems are caused by lack of transparency and lack of understanding risk. But ironically, you get some people creating these arbitrarily complicated financial products like algorithmic stablecoins, which then introduce more risk and blow everything up. So anyways, 3 Arrows Capital blew up. And all of a sudden, this crypto industry, which everyone thought was going to the moon, Bitcoin to 100,000, is in some trouble. And FTX seems like the only people who, besides like Binance, who's also really big and stable, and Coinbase, they seemed like they were doing fine. In fact, they were bailing out companies in the summer. I don't know if you remember that. SBF was likened to like Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of Chase, who like kind of was like the buck stops here. I'm like the backstop, right? So SBF was supporting the industry. He was like the stable guy. So come to like around October and November, there's all this talk about regulation. Everything's been blowing up. SBF's leading the charge on regulation. And CZ, the CEO of Binance, gets word that maybe SBF is kind of like cutting him out or making regulation that would maybe impact his business. And he doesn't like that too much. They start kind of feuding a little bit on Twitter. So when it comes out, a CoinDesk report came out that FTX's balance sheet wasn't looking that good. Like it looked pretty weak. They had a lot of coins that in theory had value if you looked at their market price. But for a variety of reasons, if you tried to sell them, they'd collapse in value. So it's sort of like this thing, a house built on sand. And a friend of mine on Twitter, he goes by Dirty Bubble Media. He released a report, and he basically said, "I think these guys are insolvent." Well, CZ saw that, and he retweeted it and started adding fuel to the fire of like the speculation. Because up to this point, everyone thought FTX is super safe, super secure. There's no reason to not keep your money there. Tom Brady keeps his money there, whatever. And CZ kind of adds fuel to the fire by saying, not only am I retweeting this, adding kind of like validity to this speculation, but also I'm going to take the FTT that I got, which part of their balance sheet was this FTT token, which is FTX's like proprietary token. And Alameda and FTX controlled a lot of it. They were using this token to basically be a large amount of collateral for their whole balance sheet. So it accounted for this huge amount of their value. And the CEO of Binance had a huge chunk of it as well. And he said, I'm going to sell all of it. And the fuel that introduced to the market is, if he sells all this FTT, and this FTT is underwriting a lot of the value of FTX.
Does FTT almost approximate like similar things if you were to buy a stock in a public company? Is that kind of like a stock in FTX?
It sort of was this proxy because what FTX was committed to doing was sort of like buying back FTT tokens. They would do this thing called the buy and burn. I think there was some amount of sharing in the revenue fees of FTX. It was kind of this convoluted thing. In my opinion, the exact value of FTT was speculative from the beginning. And it was clear that it was very tied to the performance of FTX, which is important because we'll get to later, FTX sort of built their whole scaffold on FTT, which meant that this scaffold was very wobbly. Because if FTX loses a little bit of confidence, then your value goes down. When your value goes down, you lose more confidence, and this goes down. So it was kind of like this thing this flywheel that when it was going well, you got huge amounts of growth. When it's going bad, you get a exchange death spiral, so to speak.
Actually, this structure, it's a pretty non-standard structure. Did the architects of its initial design anticipate the wobbliness of the whole system? So putting fraud and all those things that happen later aside, do you think it was difficult to anticipate this kind of FTT, FTX, elementary research, weird dynamic?
No, because I think sophisticated traders always think in terms of diversification and correlation. So if you're trying to, the way to think about risk in investing is like, if I invest in you, Lex Friedman, and then I also invest in some product you produce. The performance of those two things will be pretty correlated. So whether I invest in you or I invest in this product that you like are completely behind, I'm not de-risking. I'm basically counting all on you doing well, right? And if you do bad, my investments do very bad. So if I'm trying to build a stable thing, I shouldn't put all my eggs in the Lex Friedman basket unless I'm positive that you're going to do well, right? And these people...
As your financial advisor, I would definitely recommend you do not put all your eggs in this basket.
Right, and so you can think about it like, if I know that, these people were trained to think like this, and so the idea that you could start this exchange, you're worth billions of dollars, and you underwrite your whole system by putting most of it on your own token is insane. And what's crazy is we'll later find out that they were basically taking customer assets, which were real things like Bitcoin and Ethereum with risks that were not so correlated to FTX, and they were swapping them out. They were using to go basically gamble those and putting FTT in its place as, quote, value. So they were increasing the risk of the system in order to bet big, with the idea that if they bet big and won, we'd all be singing their praises. If they bet big and lost, I don't know if they had a plan, but I think they were being extremely risky, and there's no way to avoid their knowledge of that.
So when you say customer assets, I come to this crypto exchange, I have Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, and this is a thing that has pretty stable value over time. I mean, as crypto relatively so, and I'm going to store it on this crypto exchange, and that's the whole point. This is so this thing, to the degree that crypto holds value, it's supposed to continue holding value. There's not supposed to be an extra risk inserted into the thing.
Right, and FTX was pretty clear from the beginning that they wouldn't invest your assets in anything else. They wouldn't do anything else with it. They wouldn't trade it. That's what made FTX such like a horror story for investor confidence, is basically they made every signal that they would not do anything nefarious with your tokens. They would just put them to the side, put them in a separate account that they don't have access to, and they just kind of wait there until the day that you're ready to withdraw them. That's explicitly what they told their customers. So going back to the story a little bit, CZ then says, hey, I'm selling this token that underwrites the value of FTX. There's a total panic. SBF during this time says several lies, such as FTX assets are fine, we have enough money to cover all withdrawals, and a day later, he basically admits that wasn't the case. They don't have the money, they're shutting down, and then a few days later after that, they declare bankruptcy. I should be clear, there's Alameda Research, FTX International, and FTX US, which is the US side of things. These are three different entities. All of them are in bankruptcy, and it's not clear to the extent that they were commingling funds, but it's clear that they were commingling funds to some extent. So they kind of were taking from each other, and that is where the fraud happens, right? Because if, going back to our earlier analogy, if you're supposed to set funds aside and I find out you were using it to go make all these arbitrage trades or do market making or all these activities you were known for your like hedge fund trading firm thing, that's a huge problem, because he basically lied about this. And especially when he's saying explicitly that we have these things, we have these funds, and these things turn out to be lies. Well, again, the question of fraud comes in, and it's just like, there's no way he didn't know. So the obvious question might be, well, why isn't he locked up? Why is he running around? And it's because really his story is that he didn't know any of it. He found out that they had, to Steelman's position, he would say he was totally disconnected from what Alameda was doing. He had no idea that they had such a large margin position, that they had an accounting quirk, and that accounting quirk hit $8 billion from his view. And so when he was saying that they had money to cover it, he was saying that truthfully to the best of his ability, and he just was so distracted at the time that he made a series of increasingly embarrassing mistakes. And now he owes it to the people to right those wrongs by publicly making this huge apology tour. So you might have seen him he's been talking to nearly everyone about basically how he's just didn't know what he's doing. He's the stupidest man alive.
What are some interesting things you've learned from those interviews?
I think I've appreciated why you don't talk in that position. Most people wouldn't talk. Most people would listen to their legal counsel and not talk. I do not think any lawyer worth their salt would tell him to talk, because right now, I think the danger of what he's doing is he's locking himself into a story of how things happened. And I don't think that story is going to hold up in the coming months, because I think it's impossible. From the insider conversations I've had with Alameda Research employees, with FTX employees, it's impossible to square what they are telling me with no incentive to lie with what SBF is telling me with every incentive to lie, which is fundamentally that he didn't know they were commingling funds. He didn't know they were gambling with customer money. And it was basically this huge mistake. And it's Alameda's fault, but he wasn't involved in Alameda, a company he owned.
So like a compassionate but hard-hitting gangster that you are, very recently, you interacted with SBF on, I like how you adjust the suspenders as you're saying this. You interact on Twitter Spaces with SBF and really put his feet to the fire with some hard-hitting questions. What did you ask him? What did you learn from that interaction?
Sure, I should say first, this was not a willing interaction. I mean, I thought that was kind of the funny part of it, because I've been asking him for an interview for a while. He's been giving interviews to nearly everyone who wants one, big channels, small channels. He didn't give me one, but I managed to get some by sneaking up on some Twitter Spaces and DMing the people and being like, hey, can I come up? So I didn't get him to ask everything that I wanted, because he would leave sometimes, after I asked some of the questions. But really what I asked was about this $8 billion and zooming in on the improbability of his lack of knowledge. It's sort of like if you run a company and you know the insides and outs, and you're the top of your field, top in class, and all of a sudden it all goes bust, and you say, I had no idea how any of this worked. I didn't know. It's like the guy who runs Whataburger saying, I didn't know where we sourced our beef. I didn't know where that's a Texas example, actually.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Let's take it worldwide. Walmart. I didn't know we used Chinese manufacturers. It's that's impossible. To become Walmart, you have to know how your supply chain works. You have to know, even if you're at a high level, you know how this stuff works.
Can I do a hard turn on that and go, sure, as one must, to Hitler? Hitler's writing is not on any of the documents around, as far as I know, on the final solution. So in some crazy world, you could theoretically say, I didn't know anything about the death camps. So there's this plausible deniability in theory. So that most people would look at that and say, it's very unlikely, no.
Well, especially if all the insiders are coming out and saying, no, of course he knew. He was directing us from the top. I mean, what was clear, what's interesting about the structure, and I love the nitty-gritty.
Sorry, we're back to SBF.
Yeah, sorry.
Now we're back.
I wanted to turn us as fast as possible away from Hitler.
So the insiders in what?
Alameda Research. What was interesting is that there was this sort of one-way window going on between Alameda and FTX, where FTX employees didn't know a lot of what was going on. Alameda insiders, and I would say by design, knew almost everything that was going on at FTX. And so I think that was really interesting from the perspective of a lot of the so-called, what he's trying to ascribe to as failures or mistakes or ignorance and negligence, when looked at closely, are much more designed, and they sort of don't arise spontaneously. Because let's say, so there's this thing in banking and trading where if I run a bank and you run a trading firm, we need to have informational walls between us, because there's huge conflicts of interest that can arise, right? So the negligent argument might be that we just didn't know. We're sort of these dumb kids in the Bahamas, so we shared information equally. But when you see a one-way wall, that starts to look a lot different, right? If I have a back-end source of looking at, you're the trading firm, so you have a back-end way to look at all my accounts, and I have no idea that you're doing that, that all of a sudden looks like a much more designed thing. When it would be plausible, let's say, going to use another analogy too. If you're saying, look, I commingled funds because I was so bad at corporate structures, you would expect those companies to have a very simple corporate structure because you didn't know what you're doing, right? But what we see with FTX and Alameda is they had something like 50 companies and subsidiaries and this impossibly complicated web of corporate activity. You don't get there by accident. You don't wake up and go, oh, I designed like this watch that ticked a very specific way, but it was all accidental. If you really didn't know what you were doing, you'd end up with a simple structure. So even just like from a fundamental perspective, what SBF was doing and like the activities they were engaging in were so complicated and purposely designed to obfuscate what they were doing. It's impossible to subscribe to the negligence argument. And I want to quickly say too, like, I don't think a lot of people have honed in on this. There was insider trading going on from Alameda's perspective, where they would know what coins FTX was going to list on their exchange. There's a famous effect where, let's say you're this legitimate exchange, you list a coin, the price spikes. Insiders told me it was a regular practice for Alameda insiders to know that FTX was going to list a coin, and as a company buy up that coin so they could sell it after it listed. And they made millions of dollars. How do you do that accidentally?
Yeah, and that's illegal.
Totally illegal. So that's illegal from like, and if an individual does it, it's illegal, it's fraud. What if a company is systematically doing it? And you can't tell me that FTX or someone at FTX wasn't feeding that information to Alameda or somehow giving them keys to know that. And that would happen at the highest level. It would happen at SBF's level. And this is why his arguments of, I was dumb, I was naive, I was sort of ignorant, are so preposterous, because he's dumb and ignorant the second it becomes criminal to be smart and sophisticated, right?
But then also coming out and talking about it, which is
it's a bizarre move.
It's a bizarre, almost a dark move. Can you tell the story of the $8 billion? You mentioned $8 billion. What's the $8 billion? What's the missing $8 billion?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because it's sort of like wire fraud. He's sort of copping to like smaller crimes to avoid the big crime. The big crime is you know everything and you were behind it, right? The smaller crimes are like a little wire fraud here, a little wire fraud there. So what the $8 billion is that FTX didn't always have banking. It's hard to get banking as a crypto exchange. There's all these questions of like, where's the money coming from? Is it coming from money launderers? So for a variety of reasons, it's always been hard for exchanges to get bank accounts. So before, when FTX was just getting started, they didn't have a bank account. So how do you put money on FTX? Well, they would have you wire your money to their trading firm. Their wiring instructions would go to their trading firm. It's easier to get banking as a trading firm. So you put your money with the trading firm, and then they credit you the money on FTX. Okay, first of all, this is a whole circumvention of all these banking guidelines and regulations. That's the first thing that I think is legal. But basically what SBF argued is that there was an accounting glitch, error, problem, where when you'd send money to Alameda, even though they'd credit you on FTX, they wouldn't safeguard your deposits. Like your deposits would go into what he called a stub account, which is just like some account that's not very well labeled, kind of like a placeholder account. And he didn't realize that those were Alameda's funds, or they were playing with those funds, and that they basically should have safeguarded that for customers. That's his explanation. It's preposterous because it's $8 billion, but anyways.
Just poor labeling of accounts.
Of an $8 billion account. I mean,
What's
it's like
a billion.
A billion. This is
I do this all the time.
This is the craziest thing. Like he was talking to me, and at one point in the conversation, he's like, "Yeah, I didn't have precise because he said I didn't have knowledge of Alameda's accounts." And I said, "Well, Forbes a month ago was getting detailed accounting of Alameda," and he goes, "Oh, that wasn't detailed accounting. I just knew I was right within 10 billion or so." What is that error margin? $10 billion for a company that is arguably never worth more than 100 million. Yeah, probably never even worth more than 50 billion. Your error margin is $10 billion. You have to be, this is a guy who's sending around statements that there was no risk involved. And you're telling me he had an error margin of $10 billion? That is the difference between a healthy company and a company so deep underwater you're going to jail. So you have to believe that he is impossibly stupid and square that with the sophistication that he brought to the table. I think it's an impossible mark. I don't even think it is.
Do you think he is incompetent, insane, or evil? If you were to bet money on each of those.
Incompetent, insane, or evil?
Insane meaning he's lying to everyone, but also to himself, which is a little bit different than incompetence.
He's not incompetent. So I think he's some combination of insane and evil, but it's impossible to know unless we know deep inside his heart how deluded he is versus a calculated strategy. And I think if you look at SBF, I think he's a fascinating individual. He's a horrible human being. Let's start there. But he's also somewhat interesting from a psychology perspective because he's very open about the fact that he understands image and he understands how to cultivate image, the importance of image, so well that I think a lot of people, even though they've talked about it, aren't emphasizing that enough when interacting with him. This is a man whose entire history is about cultivating the right opinions at the right time to achieve the right effect. Why do you think he would suddenly change that approach when he has all the more reason to cultivate an image?
So he is extremely good naturally, or
I don't know if he's good, but he's hyper aware.
So he's deliberate in cultivating a public image and controlling the public image.
You know about the Democrat donations. He knew to donate to the right people, $40 million. He says on a call that we released with Tiffany Fong, he says on a call that he donated the same amount to Republicans. There's speculation on whether this is true because he's a liar, whatever. So caveat there. But he said he donated to Republicans the same amount, but he donated dark because he knew that most journalists are liberal and they would kind of hold that against him. So he wanted all the sides to be in his favor, in his pocket, while simultaneously understanding the entire media landscape and playing them like a fiddle by cultivating this image of I'm this progressive, woke billionaire who wants to give it all away, do everything for charity. I drive a Corolla while living in $1 million penthouse, multi-million. But that was sort of the angle. He understood so well how to play the media, and I think he underestimated when he did this how much people would put him under a deeper microscope, and I don't think he has achieved the same level of success in cultivating this new image because I think people are so skeptical now, no one's buying it. But I think he's trying it. He's doing it to the best.
But it has worked leading up to this particular wobbly situation. So before that, wasn't there a public perception of him being a force for good, a financial force for good?
100%. Yeah. Somebody from Sequoia Capital, wrote this glowing review that he's going to be the world's first trillionaire. There's so many pieces done on he's the most generous billionaire in the world that he was sort of like the steel man of, it's possible to make tons of money. This is like the effective altruism movement. Make as much money as you can, as fast as you can, and give it all away. And he was sort of like the poster child for that. And he did give some of it away and got a lot of press for it. And I think that was kind of by design. I want to address a real quick point. A lot of people have said that Binance played a role. And while they catalyzed this, insolvency is a problem that will eventually manifest either way. So I don't put any blame on CZ for basically causing this meltdown. The underlying foundation was unstable, and it was going to fall apart at the next push. I mean, he just happened to be the final kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, the catalyst that revealed.
But it's I don't think he's culpable for FTX's malfeasance in how they handled accounts, if that makes sense.
So what role did they play? Could they have helped alleviate some of the pain of investors, of people that held funds there?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I don't know. I would see some kind of weird obligation, like with the $2 billion they made on FTX. Remember, they got $2 billion. Some of it in cash, some of it some of it in FTT tokens. I don't know how much actual cash they have from that deal, but they have billions from the success of what seems to be a fraud. It seems to have been a fraud from early on. They had the back door as early as early 2020, from what I can tell.
So the back door between FTX and Alameda. Do you think CZ saw who SBF is? What is he's doing?
No, I think CZ is like, he's a shark. I think he's good at building a big business.
Like a good shark or a bad shark? I don't know.
I think sharks just eat. I mean, I don't know. I think
my relationship with shark has like Finding Nemo. There's a shark in that.
Sure.
I don't know. So
I think like Jeff Bezos is a shark. So whether people have loaded connotations of like how they feel about Jeff Bezos. I mean, I would say like I think CZ is a ruthless businessman. I think he's cold. He's calculated. He's very deliberate, and I think what he should do in this position is forfeit the funds that he profited from that investment, because largely I think it was it's owed to the customers. There's so much hurting out there, so I think they could do a lot of good around that. I don't know if they will, because I don't know if he sees it in his best interest. I think that's probably how he's thinking, but yeah, I think they could have helped, or they could still help there.
What do you think suffered the most from this so far?
The little account holders. This is always true. So one of the big temptations with fraud, we've covered a lot of scams, frauds, is everyone looks at the big number. Everyone, that's the headline, billions of dollars, the top 50 creditors, what everyone thinks of first. But quickly when you dig down, you realize that most people who lost $10 million, I mean, I'm sure that's terrible for them. I wish them to get their money back. But it's usually the people with like 50,000 or less that are most impacted. Usually they do not have the money to spare. Usually they're not diversified in a sophisticated way. So I think it's those people. I think it's the small account holders that I feel the worst for. And unfortunately, they often get the least press time or airtime.
That's the really difficult truth of this, is that especially in the culture of cryptocurrency, there's a lot of young people who are not diversified. They're basically all in on a particular crypto. And it just breaks my heart to think that there's somebody with 50,000 or 30,000 or 20,000. But the point is that money is everything they own.
Right.
And now what? Their life is basically destroyed. Like, imagine you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. You saved up, you've been working, you saved up. And this is it. This is basically destroying a life.
What's so brutal about this is that this all comes on the back. The entire crypto market comes from the deep distrust of traditional finance, right? Yeah, 2008, everybody lost trust in the banking systems. And they lost trust that if those banking systems acted in a corrupt way, that they would receive the justice. It turned out that the banks received favorable treatment. People didn't. So people lost faith in the structure of our financial system in a way that is, we're still feeling the reverberations of it. And so when crypto came along, it was like kind of this way to reinvent the wheel, reinvent the world for the like sort of lowly and the like less powerful, and kind of level the playing field. So what's so sad about events like this is you see that fundamentally a lot of the power structures are the same, where the people at the top face little repercussions for what they do. The people at the bottom are still getting screwed. The people at the bottom are still getting lied to, and law enforcement is way behind the ball.
Do you think this really damaged people's trust in cryptocurrency?
For sure. Way bigger than 3 Arrows Capital. It's because of who SBF was. It's not just the dollar figure behind it. It's because he wooed so many of our media elites who should have been calling him out, or at least investigating him and not rubber stamping him. It's an indictment of our financial system, even our most sophisticated people in BlackRock, in Sequoia, who didn't see this coming, who also rubber stamped him. And you just wonder, like, if you can't trust the top people in crypto who are supposedly the good guys, the guys saving crypto, just a month ago or 2 months ago, he was the guy on Capitol Hill that was talking to Gary Gensler, to all the top people in Washington. He was orchestrating the regulation of crypto. If that guy is a complete fraudster, liar, psychopath, and nobody knew it until it was too late, what does that mean about the system itself that we're building?
So you are one of, if not the best, like fraudster investigators in the world. Was this on your radar at all, SBF, over the past couple of years? Were any red flags going off for you?
Yes. So funny enough, like one of my videos from 6 months ago or so blew up because I got to give a lot of credit to Matt Levine at Bloomberg, great journalist, great finance journalist. And I want to say, when I talk about Media Elite, there are people doing great work in these mainstream institutions. It's not a monolith. Just like independent media isn't all doing great work and all the corporate media is bad or whatever. There's like these overarching narratives that I don't subscribe to. So Matt Levine's a great journalist. He did an interview with SBF where he got Sam to basically describe a lot of what was going on in DeFi, but a kind of a larger philosophy around crypto. He described a Ponzi scheme where he just described this black box. It does nothing. But if we ascribe it value, then we can create more value and more value and more value. It kind of was this ridiculous description of a Ponzi scheme, but there's no moral judgment on it. It was like, oh yeah, this is great. We can make a lot of money from it. And Matt is like, well, it sounds like you're in the Ponzi business and business is good. I made a video about that. I said, this is ridiculous. This is absurd, whatever. It's obscene. But I didn't explicitly call SBF a fraud there. And I think I think I saw some of it, but like many people, I think a lot of us were kind of like, I think a lot of us missed how wrong everyone could be at the same time. I did notice leading up to the crash what was happening, and I called it out a day or a day and a half before it happened, because I saw my friends post Dirty Bubble Media, and this was the first real look into the heart of their finances, because they're this black box. You just kind of had to evaluate them without knowing much. And once we got a peek under the hood of what their finances were, I realized, oh my gosh, these guys might be completely insolvent. So I made a tweet about it. I hope some people saw it and got their money out. But pretty quickly after that, I caught the narrative of what was really going on at Alameda, that it was basically this Ponzi scheme that they had built.
Do you ever sit like Batman in the dark since you fight crime and wonder, like, sad, just staring into the darkness and thinking I should have caught this earlier?
Yeah, I think
in your $10 billion,
$10 million.
$10 million.
We're working our way there.
With a bunch
sure,
of
like it's never enough. It's never enough. Like, you always could be catching stuff sooner. You always could be doing more.
I mean, the fascinating thing you said is that one of the lessons here is that a large number of people, influential, smart people, could all do wrong at the same time in terms of their evaluation of SBF.
This is one thing that I don't understand too, is like, I think it's one thing to not see something. I think it's another thing to like rubber stamp or explicitly endorse. I feel like a lot of people didn't look too close at SBF because I think a lot of the warning signs were there. But my feeling is, if you're a Sequoia, if you're a BlackRock, wouldn't you do that due diligence? I mean, like before just endorsing something, especially in the crypto space. This is just why I don't do any deals in the crypto space ever, because it's impossible to know which ones are going to be the like big hits or the big frauds or whatever. But if you're going to make that bet, if you're going to make that play, you would think that you would do all the research in the world and you would get sophisticated looks at their liabilities, at how they were structured, all that stuff. And that is the most shocking part, is not that, people missed it, because you can miss fraud, but that there was so many glowing endorsements like, this guy is not going to be that thing. We explicitly